Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Scottish Rugby Return to Rugby Stage 3 update. We've got over 300 people on this webinar, which is really fantastic. So Neil and Jen are going to talk you through the latest update, and we've also got my colleague Ken Muir on the webinar as well with us. Okay, so just in terms of this morning's webinar, so welcome from myself. So really nice to have everybody on the webinar. Thanks for your time this morning. Really appreciate it. Hopefully the guidance and support that we're going to give you today will be valuable for you in your role in your club. Jen will give a facilities update. Neil will talk about return to train update. And what we would say is, as before, you know, quick Q&A used throughout, but we probably won't pick up any of your questions today, but we'll respond to you and we'll follow up with, we'll write back to you in terms of the answers to the questions that you're asking. So we'll have an FAQ that we'll share with you next week from today's webinar. Just in terms of some key messages, just to remind people that COVID-19 hasn't gone away, so we must adhere to the guidance that we're getting from Scottish Government and also from ourselves in terms of Scottish Rugby. We're still at a stage of the pandemic where extreme caution is still necessary. We're seeing all the local little clusters and outbreaks that we've got happening at different areas in Scotland and Aberdeen, we've had in Dumfries, etc. So we need to take extreme caution and to be really careful. And we should always assume that the virus is present wherever you go. So make sure in terms of your personal hygiene of, you know, making sure that you're washing your hands, etc., that you're doing all that kind of stuff as well, and just taking good care of yourself. And just a reminder to people that the transition to touch rugby, although it signifies a return to the more traditional rugby activities, this should not be seen as a return to normal for us, and it should feel the same in your club, and it'll be the same in terms of the return to touch rugby as well. Just also want to remind you of the facts, so remember your face coverings, etc. I'll not go through it where it's being reiterated every day that we're hearing the First Minister doing her talk from the podium. So just really asking you to take care of yourself, and by taking care of yourself, you're taking care of your family, and you're also taking care of your people within your clubs as well. And where are we now? So our Scottish Rugby roadmap through the return to stages 3 to 6 has been agreed with the Scottish Government, which is fantastic for us. We've got 155 clubs with a COVID-19 safety coordinator, and as we go into returning back to the club, we'll be looking for more clubs to have their safety coordinator in place. And then we've had 6,286 people having completed the COVID-19 e-learning module. So that's a variety of players, coaches, volunteers, parents, etc. So that's really fantastic that we've got that number completing. And if we move on now, so Jen will take us through her facilities update from the announcements yesterday. So Jen, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. So, yep, I'll take you through some of the updates that we've had even in the past couple of weeks, just to share them with you. So to give you a picture of where we are just now, pitches and outdoor catering and hospitality remain the same. The guidance is there. Toilets can be open, including changing room toilets. The use of changing facilities should remain closed, so it's just the toilets that are allowed to be used. However, in certain circumstances where there is someone with a special requirement or someone with a disability, the changing areas can be used, but that is the only time that it can be for now. In terms of indoor hospitality, we got an update 2 weeks ago around kind of stricter procedures for indoor hospitality. And that is, the first one is it's now mandatory to collect customer details for contact and tracing. Where possible, individuals should book tables in advance. There should be no queuing at the bar or outside to get into it. And to cut down background noise from music down to televisions. This is to prevent people having to raise their voice, shout, or get a little bit closer to each other. So these all came in effect as of the 14th of August. So it was just a wee update on what that indoor hospitality looks like. And just a reminder that the chances of contracting and transmission of the virus is much higher indoors than it is outdoors. And again, that's something the First Minister has continued to relay to us all. So if we just move on to the updates that came from yesterday, you'll all be aware that as of the 31st of August, indoor areas can open for physical activity and non-contact sport, and that includes gyms. This is for all ages. However, there are strict guidelines that will remain in place, and that does include physical distancing for adults. On that, you may have already seen, we'll be running a webinar on Wednesday next week at 7 p.m, and it will be specifically about this information. So we'll talk you through gym usage, gym guidance, we'll talk you through indoor physical activity and sport, obviously non-contact. We'll chat through the differences from adult to youth, and we'll give advice on multi-use facilities. So I appreciate some clubs may have the facility to provide training on the pitches, some indoor activity, as well as hospitality. We've got some real clear guidance on that for you. And we've also got the resources labelled there that we'll provide to support clubs in this. So really clear gym usage guidance and a supporting document that goes alongside that and gives a lot more detail on what you should do before, during and after a session. And I just want to reiterate on this one, is this is going to be linked specifically to the use of the gym for physical prep for rugby. For general use of gyms, if you do have general membership, you'll follow Scottish Government guidance on that. The indoor physical activity guidance will also be available next week, and we'll talk through that. And as well as I said, the multi-use facility guidance. So all of this still to come, as it doesn't take into play as of the 31st. So we will do the webinar next Wednesday, and the resources will be available at the very latest next Thursday online.
Great, thanks Jen. Hi everyone. I'm just going to give you an update on return to training. So I'm going to start with an update on our roadmap and give you some just outlines of where we're moving to and what is going to be happening as a result of Monday and the Scottish Government's announcement yesterday. So we are still in stage 3 of our return to rugby roadmap. It has been updated and the guidance is now available online. That comes into play as of Monday. That means that modified touch rugby for adults can resume, and that brings our whole game now in line. We had the youth game currently taking place for touch rugby, and now adults can do the same as of Monday, which is great. So obviously we're expecting a number of clubs to start opening up their facilities for this type of activity. So we do need to be cautious in our approach. This isn't a return to normal, but touch rugby hopefully gives a good opportunity for people to get physically active again in a group setting. So we'll be in this stage for a minimum of 3 weeks, and as with all of our dates, it is dependent upon the Scottish Government route map. But we hope to move to stage 4 within the coming weeks, and that will allow us to move towards some modified full contact activities. More details to be shared on that near the time, but just a flavour of what that modified full contact activities would look like are things like 1v1 tackling practice, 1v1 scrummaging, etc. So some modified full contact before we then move into stage 5, which is where full contact training can begin. So stage 5 is really the time where you'll see most restrictions on the game of rugby in terms of how it is played and what's allowed removed. So it'll be more of a traditional feel to training once we get into stage 5. And again, we'll issue guidance in the lead up to each of these stages for coaches, for match officials, for volunteers and for players. As we move through the stages, once we get to stage 5.2, that's the subtle difference there, is that's when structured friendly matches will be permitted, and we hope to give at least 2 weeks of that before the start of the competitive season on Saturday the 31st of October. So hopefully two full weeks of opportunity of time for friendly fixtures to take place, and from a player welfare perspective, it's really important to ease players back into full games of rugby, and obviously not throw them into a situation where they may not be prepared for. So that's an overview of where we're at. The rest of this presentation I'm going to go through is going to focus on the first column there, around about the updated Stage 3 guidance. First of all, just in terms of who should attend training, it's really important that we remember that only people who are feeling well, showing no symptoms at all, should attend training. Really, really clear. It's probably the most important message we can give out today, bar any other guidance really regarding training, is that our players should not be attending training if they're feeling unwell or have any symptoms. And lots of guidance available in our resources, but also on the Scottish Government website and NHS website. But we need to ensure that our players understand that and do err on the side of caution when it comes to attending any sort of physical activity. Just a little bit of a note in terms of players who may be returning to activity who have recovered from the virus. In our first aid and pitchside care guidance document that we've announced yesterday, there is some information on there for coaches, physios, and the players themselves about how to return, which recommends that there's medical assessments taking place before physical activity resumes if you have had COVID-19 and are looking to return to rugby. Okay, so what's new for the adult game? Just going to go through what is previously noted and where we're moving to. So as of today, we are currently still in the same situation where adults can participate in maximum groups of 15 in a half pitch from maximum of 5 households. And the 5 households piece is critical here, because as we move forward, as of Monday, the limit on households has been removed. It is now unlimited households within still a maximum of 15 per half pitch. So that really opens up a lot of opportunities, still within a touch rugby sense, and we'll come on to that in a moment, but it does provide a lot of opportunity for more players to get back to activity, and they don't need to obviously socially distance anymore on the pitch. So whilst they're on the pitch, players don't need to socially distance, whilst obviously away from the pitch, they do. So that's quite a key message as well, that only on the pitch do they not need to socially distance to play touch. Out with the pitch, they do. Non-contact activities is where we've moved from, and as of today, we're still in that situation where only skill activities, you can pass the ball, etc., but no games. But we are now moving, as of Monday, to modified touch rugby activities, and I'll go into more details about this in a moment, but we have some specific sanctioned rules around about touch rugby that have been agreed with the Scottish Government. So from a guidance perspective, just a couple of notes, and these are just some snapshots of the infographic that we produced. So key piece just highlighted there, still no close contact rugby activities. So no scrum, no tackle, no line out activities as of Monday. It's still very much touch rugby in our sense. The government obviously talked about contact sport returning. Contact sport in the government's terms does refer to touch rugby. So we are only progressing to a touch rugby sense. So no use of tackle shields or bags at this stage. It is very much still a touch rugby situation as we cautiously return our game towards its more traditional formats. In terms of numbers, we've talked about 15 already from unlimited households, and we should be working in bubbles where possible and keeping those bubbles consistent throughout our training sessions. And non-contact skills can still be undertaken, obviously. So we can still do passing, handling activities as we were doing in our previous stage. So there are some more opportunities there out with the game of touch that you may wish to progress to within your adult teams. The modified game of touch rugby, as I said before, has been approved by Scottish Government and is a specific set of rules. And the reason behind this, some of the rules in there, is to try and limit the amount of exposure each player has to prolonged face-to-face physical contact. So rugby has a unique risk factor when it comes to that face-to-face contact. Certainly, as we progress through the roadmap, we are still considering low variations within the game. But at the moment, the touch variations are there to limit that amount of exposure. So we're very much promoting that evasion game, as limited touches as possible when it comes to just one-handed touch is the key, and we must stick to this set of regulations. Other games of touch can't be played at this stage, but however, when we move into stage 4, we will hopefully be able to I suppose just ease up on some of those regulations. But at the moment, it's very much this game of touch or nothing. So just a couple of points on some of the rules. Is one-handed touch, so we just want to minimize the amount of actual physical contact being made, so very much promoting one-handed touch. We want to promote an evasion game anyway out with the situation, but in this situation, within the COVID situation, pandemic, we want to very much promote an evasion game. Players must attempt to evade the ball carrier. If they don't, we advise turnover. So no direct running, trying to run over people we want them to evade. And again, that just tries to limit the amount of exposure to face-to-face contact. It'll be self-refereed. Okay, so the players referee that themselves. No kicking, and that's really just to avoid any balls being kicked onto other pitches, and therefore potentially, again, increasing the risk of transmission. So they're the key rules moving forward. And from a pitch perspective, just a few points to note. We do need a gap of minimum of 10 metres between the pitches. That will allow coaches to be within that area. So we certainly do recommend that coaches don't take to the pitch whilst that game of touch is going on, and they stay within that area. Keep away from the touch lines, as we may have people, first aiders, etc., on the touch lines, and away from the goal lines where we've got the posts. Single entry and exit points for players. So where possible, we would like clubs and COVID-19 safety coordinators are looking at this at the moment, is have a designated entry point where we have hand sanitizer stations, where players must go through those areas to sanitize prior to training and then after training. That's really, really crucial at this stage of our return. Ball cleaning stations, so between sessions and before and after each session, we need to clean the ball. Just general soap and hot water is fine at this stage, but they must be cleaned between every session and as regularly as possible. Bibs can be used, and we recommend that they're handed out to players to keep and wash themselves. So in essence, a bib would become part of someone's personal equipment, and that's how we advise the use of bibs during this stage. So a little bit of coaching guidance. So as players are returning, we need to just go back to those core principles of age and stage appropriate activities. We advise that coaches do look at the planning process of planning a return to play. That will often need a lot of consideration about those players who've had a lengthy layoff. We know that returning from a sedentary type of situation, potentially 6 months for some people, into, let's say, quite an intense game of touch rugby could have injury considerations. So please look at our Activate programme for a thorough warm-up and cool down, and we encourage a really, really thorough process when it comes to looking after our players' welfare needs. Be very conscious of the intensity and volume of the sessions, and again, just be very, very much aware of what players have been doing during lockdown. Have they been physically active? Have they not? You may wish to put into bubbles players who are maybe a little bit, so we say, fitter than others, just like we'd normally do in a pre-season. But certainly in this situation, we need to be very, very conscious of that. We have announced some pitch side and first aid guidance. This has been developed in line with our medical professionals and representatives from the club and school game, and is in line with some guidance that was produced by the British Medical Journal recently. It provides updated guidance on CPR, PPE equipment for healthcare professionals and first aiders. As I said before, it does look at some guidance on how to return a player who's had COVID. And then just reminds people about our generic player welfare messages in rugby around about concussion, and injury management. And finally, it gives an update in the document around about first aid qualifications. We are currently not in a position to deliver our World Rugby First Aid Level 1 course, due to the restrictions of delivering indoors. However, there are a series of online modules that World Rugby and ourselves have developed, which are promoted within this document. Just moving on to a slightly separate issue and discussion point, but this relates to how clubs should deal with a positive case within their environment. And we've obviously had the Aberdeen lockdown situation as we're currently in, and off the back of that, we have developed some processes, which some of this was shared with the COVID-19 safety coordinators last week. This documentation is available online, but just to highlight a couple of key areas to you, that when a positive case from a member of the club who has been active within activities, so let's say a player who's actually been at the club recently, who's then tested positive, we do recommend that there is all activity within the club is postponed with immediate effect until a full risk assessment has been undertaken in conjunction with local public health guidelines. We will very much support clubs in this process, and through a nominated Scottish Rugby member of staff, we will be able to help clubs deal with the situation and liaise with the relevant bodies. So dealing with a local lockdown, let's say the Aberdeen situation is likely to occur again, and we would like to just give a little bit of guidance to clubs on how to deal with this situation. This three-step document here just outlines some of the initial steps that will be taken by ourselves at Scottish Rugby, and how we'll then communicate that to the clubs and schools in the area. So firstly, as soon as a lockdown is announced, we will receive that information and convene a group to look at the impact of the restrictions, and obviously look at guidance that we then communicate to clubs. And I must say at this point that each local lockdown may be very specific to that local authority. So no two lockdowns are the same, and we certainly anticipate each lockdown having some bespoke elements to it. So we will consider all the implications on our return to rugby guidance, and then look through our regional teams to support clubs in the area, and obviously communicate our guidance through the process. At the moment, we are in a situation where there's no restrictions on physical activity within the Aberdeen area. So, as we are currently in this webinar as we speak, as of Monday, clubs can progress into our newly updated Stage 3 guidance, as long as it is safe to do so and in line with local health board and local authority guidance at the time. So that's everything from me. I'm just going to hand over to Sheila.
Thanks for that, Neil. So just really in terms of next steps, we have a webinar on the 26th of August at 7 o'clock, which is about gym reopening and indoor physical activity. So we'll give you an update there from the announcement of how we progress that. And then when the week commencing the 31st of August, there'll be further communication to clubs on our return to rugby stage 4 and more information around modified full contact. So that's really it from us. We've been taking, I know that my colleague Ken has been answering some of the questions live that you've got at the moment. And Ken, I understand that there's one question that you wanted to answer live just now.
Yes, I think it was just a clarification about the difference between Scottish Government phases and our phases. So the question was, I thought we were following Scottish Government phases stage 4 from Scottish Government seems to be from stage 4 from Scottish Government seems to be a long way off. So I think it's just probably worth Neil just confirming the difference.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ken. Yeah, so that question. So as we have expected, the government have brought forward some stage 4 elements into their phase 3. So that's where we are at the moment. We're in a situation where what was anticipated to be stage 4 is actually now in stage 3. So as we progress forward into modified contact, it may well be that we progress into our return to rugby stage 4, whilst the government is still within a stage 3 situation. But that's still to be confirmed as we move forward. But certainly at the moment we are currently in our stage 3, which is obviously aligned to government's phase 3.
Great stuff. Thanks for that, Neil. And Neil, just another question was about when will the webinar be live on the website?
Great, yeah. So we've done this webinar quite early today because it gives us time to edit this and put it up onto our website this afternoon. So it will be live for the weekend. And what we'll do is notify everyone who's been on this webinar when it does go out. So we'll email everyone with a link.
Great stuff. Sorry, Ken. Sorry?
Just another question. There's quite a lot of talk about what applies for minis and the numbers on pitches in terms of quarters, halves and wholes.
Yep. So very much same situation as in the youth current guidance in the youth guidance. So we just refer all mini coaches and conveners to the youth guidance that was announced in early July. But it's very much aligned to our adult guidelines in terms of 15 max for half a pitch. And the key thing, just to I suppose note in the mini game, that we are not expecting any festivals, if you like, mini rugby festivals, to be permitted until our stage 6 as of earliest. But we will look at communicating specific mini rugby guidance near that time.
Great. And Neil, maybe just one last question, which is, does the coach count as one of the 15 in the bubble?
Yes, they do. Yeah, they do. So they count as one person.
Okay. Great stuff. Well, we've got a number of questions here, so we'll make sure that we feed back to you. We'll put up online the answers to the questions that you've asked throughout this webinar. And as Neil said, the webinar will be online very soon. So just really want to take the opportunity of thanking everybody for your time. Hopefully you found the support and guidance that we've given you useful. And if there's at any point you feel doubtful or you have a question around what it is that you're planning to do, please feel free to come back and ask us. If there's a situation in your club that you're not sure about, that if we can give you some advice or some support, then really happy to do that as well. Okay, but take care, folks. Have a good weekend, and we'll look forward to catching up soon.